too far from here. Great All-American. Went to Georgia, was an All-American, and then played for the Saints for 8 years. Is that right? Was an All-Pro and has a Super Bowl ring. So we told you we were going to get some athletes and leaders in front of him. We weren't messing around. We're really pleased for him to be here tonight. Don't know him real well myself. Met him a couple of times, but his reputation is just outstanding, and we're really pleased to have him come tonight. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity, guys. Appreciate y'all being here. This is going to be a Q&A session more than anything. You know, we teed it up because I already know the first couple questions. I'll go ahead and answer those, but by the end of this deal, you can go ahead and churn them out. Don't give me the old stare down and look down. You know the trick. I've been in class. But talking about leadership, right? So the first questions are, who are some of the best leaders that I've been exposed to, been around, been able to work with and work along, work for, those kind of things. And what made them great leaders, right? So, played football. Obviously, in the football world, who are some of the best leaders? Well, when I played with the New Orleans Saints, a guy like Drew Brees jumps out at you, right? So what made him such a great leader? Well, one, when I showed up at work, and if you have treatment, you show up like an hour and a half early. When you pull into the parking lot, he's already there. And when we leave, every Thursday night, as an offensive line, I played offensive line, we'd go to dinner. We'd go to dinner as an offensive line, kind of a work-together thing. And he would want to come with us to build the camaraderie. The only thing is he would always show up late. You think, what a jerk, right? No. He was still at the facility studying film, breaking down film, trying to get a game plan together, working with the coaches. So he'd call in his order to one of us and would show up late because he's staying extra hours. So we showed up early, he left late, right? Obviously, that's a guy you want to follow because he's putting in the hours, he's committed to something. The second thing was he was passionate about what he did. He wanted for you to be successful. He wanted for this team to be successful and had a passion for it and was willing to work at it. So as a leader, there's a couple different ways to go about things, right? I mean, there's the yellers and the screamers. There's flashback a little bit. Picked a quarterback out of the gates. That's kind of the position comes with certain opportunities for leadership. Well, that's not always the case. Tony Gilbert was a linebacker that I got to play with at the University of Georgia. Quiet guy from Macon, laugh, good time guy, but didn't say a whole lot. He wasn't a guy that would want to get up in front of the group and give the rah-rah speeches. That just wasn't his nature. But worked his tail off constantly. If he was in the weight room, he was pushing himself. By our senior year, there's this big old monument, and 2 players were recognized for the amount of work that they put in. Tony's name's on that. It's recognition for a guy who puts in the work. Not a talker, but when the time comes, and during that senior year, we came in together, and he spoke. He had a platform for guys to listen. So not a guy that's constantly chirping or, come on guys, but is leading by example and buying in with credibility because he works his tail off. Okay? Passion. I started with that. You gotta have some invested interest in what you're doing. You can't be a good leader. You couldn't be a strong leader if you don't care about what you're doing, about what the common goal is. That's what makes leadership so special. It separates just a guy who's got a title from a guy that you want to follow, because he has a passion for it. So he's working hard at it. He's committed to it. He's got a passion for it. It doesn't matter that you're not the most vocal guy. It doesn't matter that each personality is different. But it also counts for accountability. Can you be counted on? Is your words matching up with your actions? Let me give you a contrast for that. I've listed a couple good leaders. What makes a bad leader? Okay. Quarterback, going to remain unnamed. while we're at the facility, does the right thing, practices hard, works out in the weight room well, says the right things in the media, that kind of thing. You get him away from the facility, and his life is a wreck. He's doing all the wrong things. So to follow a guy like that, you go, can I really count on you? Are you the guy consistently, or are you just kind of one guy at some points and somebody else another? You know what I mean? I mean, we know who I'm talking about. You probably encountered a guy like that. When it's time for the camera turns on and everything looks pristine, but you get him away from that perfect setting and things change. Not a guy you can count on. He doesn't have that accountability. Let me cut to the chase a little bit, because there's one leader that's separate from any other, and it's important to recognize that early in this process. It's someone that was willing to sacrifice everything for what he believed in. So obviously the passion was there. Constant accountability at every turn. Constant. No matter what the trial, what the test, there's an accountability to the purpose, and he was true to who he was and what he stood for. And the second was he was real. Some of you have gone ahead and answered that question. Who am I talking about? But he's a leadership. He's a leader for all of us, and that's Jesus Christ. Because Jesus Christ is not. He's not a figment of imagination. He's not a character in a book that's got some pretty cool stories. Jesus Christ is real. And that's a decision that each one of you has to make, is whether or not you believe that there is God. Let me give you a little cheat sheet on all these answers. Most of them are going to be yes. Is God real? You have to answer that for each person. Now, you pray, if you go to church, your parents are probably taking you there on Sunday morning sometimes, and you've probably gone to chapel services, and you've listened to people talk about God and about Jesus. And for the most part, those people that are talking to you, they've answered those questions for themselves. But you have to answer that. You believe that God is real. You believe that Jesus Christ existed. That He is God on this earth. And He came here for us. And sacrificed His life for us. Led by example so that we can all see how we're supposed to live our lives. And if you believe these things, then it's set there for you. It's right out in the open for you. Because He's come for us. Now for me, that answer, I've answered it for myself. Because I know that there's a God. I know God is real. I know Jesus Christ is real. He's not just a story of books about some guy that did some good things. But He is the Savior who came to this earth and sacrificed Himself for all of us. Now to me, that's crazy. Because, simplistic terms, I picture like owning a little ant farm. You know what I mean? You got the little ant farm, you put food in it, you watch it. Never had one, but I thought it was pretty cool. Well, they're just ants. But I kind of run the show and make sure, everything's right. But to humble myself to these ants and become part of it, and then sacrifice myself to them, obviously, it's not the best analogy in the world, but you understand what I'm saying. This is the creator of everything. Anything that can be done, he can do. And He is real. And so He's willing to humble Himself to get human form, come show us the example, then sacrifice Himself to us, because some morons back in the day were scared. And they didn't understand it. And is willing to do these things. And He sacrifices and takes all of our sin so that we can live in Him. Now to me, that is, He's capable of doing everything. Anything and everything. And He's willing to humble Himself and come down and live in this world with us so that we can see an example, so that we can reach salvation, because before that we couldn't do it. When you look through the Old Testament and there's a checklist of things that you had to do, that you have to go through, and you check off the list. Well, we're not perfect, so here's the ways that you can make some atonements and sacrifices. And we'd screw that up time and time again, right? So he's like, all right, let's start a new covenant. Let me come down. Let me show you how I want you to live. I'm going to sacrifice myself for all of you. And here's the cool part. All you have to do is recognize that, believe in me, and make me Lord of your life. And that's pretty cool. That is unbelievable to me. Because we're talking about leadership, right? You have to humble yourself, right? Because, the guy that's willing to sacrifice everybody else and stay in the back, not much of a leader. You see that in sports. The guy that's willing to talk the talk, but then puts everybody in front of himself, what's he sacrificing? Not much, right? It's easy to talk about it, but it's hard to pick up your flag and run out in front and hope that you've bought in enough with the guys around you that they're willing to follow you, right? I mean, that's not an easy task, especially not to lead the charge. So, to me, there's a leader that sets himself apart, that's willing to put himself out on the line when he didn't really have to, and humble himself for those that some would not be deserving, and make the ultimate sacrifice for others. Now that is an unbelievable leader, right? Pretty awesome. So, when you finally come to that point where you realize Jesus is real, God is real, and you think, I can no longer deny that. You know it in your heart, you feel it in your soul, you know that Jesus is real. Then the next step is to turn it all over and say, here are the keys to my life. I want you to lead, because if I follow my way, you're going to go wayward. You're going to that's what blows my mind sometimes, is that people sometimes want to do this, right? They say, I kind of think Jesus is real, but I don't even want to address the issue. Because if that happens, I might make some changes that I feel uncomfortable with, and I might not be able to go out on Friday night and make mistakes because, you get me? We're talking about God, the creator of everything. Everything. We're not talking about good times on a Friday night. We're not talking about some weak choices and how that's going to affect you and, golly, I can't go to this party. But you're talking about an opportunity to have a real relationship with Jesus, a real person, a real God that wants a relationship with each one of us. You're talking about sacrificing, some selfish, indulgent ways. Yes. Yes. Which one's worth more to you? Eternity or some bad mistakes? So, once you figure out that Jesus is real and he sacrificed himself, that he wants a relationship with you, to make him Lord of your life, sometimes it's a challenge and it puts you in some sticky spots, but is he worth following? If you can answer those first couple questions, that last one should be pretty easy. And that is what makes a leader truly special. Is that people can believe in that leader, and you want to go where he's willing to take you. Right? You talk about Jesus, I want to go where he wants to take me. I want to go to heaven. I want to follow him. Okay? In a worldly sense. If you want to be a leader, are you willing to sacrifice what needs to be sacrificed and take those around you to a place where they want to be? Are you somebody that people want to follow? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself for those things? Because it's not easy to be a leader. It's not. It's easier to sit back and sit in the back row and just kind of do the status quo and be a part, rather than what it takes to take up the mantle and be a leader. We're talking about worldly stuff now, and on a team. It's much easier to just be a guy, right? It's hard sometimes to put yourself out there. You play, for us, you're either the young guy on the team, or a freshman, or just a offensive lineman, just a role player. Right? There's 1,000 different excuses and reasons that can limit you from accepting the fact that you have an opportunity to be a leader in whatever capacity that might be. It's on my soapbox a little bit. Forgive me. It's teed up, geared up. All right, open it up. Questions? Anyone? It's open.
I got one.
Yeah, it's coaches. Yes.
You know, for these guys, it's tough because they now, in other words, kind of the purpose of what we're doing here is to hopefully learn from people like yourself and then be able to take that message back and live it, not learn it, but live it. How hard was it for you in high school and college and in the pros as a follower of Christ to do the right thing?
Well, there's a big difference between knowing it and living it. I mean, that's what you're getting on, right? The devil knows the Bible better than I do. He can recite the verses one by one to you. So he knows it. He just doesn't believe in it. He didn't want to follow it. He didn't want to make Jesus Lord. So it's not about knowing it. Knowing it isn't enough. And it's not about practicing it. You know, you can, well, I'm going to do the Christian thing this time. No, that isn't enough either. It's about being it. Being a disciple of Christ. Being a follower of Jesus. And there are times where it is hard. No doubt about it. You're the young guy, or your buddies are doing it. Yes, those situations are tough. They're not to be minimized. They're not to be minimized because they're real and they're hard. And sometimes it is hard to do the right thing. And sometimes part of your flesh wants to do the wrong thing. Right or wrong? I mean, you felt it, right? There are times where you're like, golly, I want to do that. Yes or no? That's real. You can't ignore the fact that we are flesh. We are set up for and given the opportunity to make big mistakes. You have that opportunity for you daily. But it's where do you want to place your foundation? You place it on yourself and where you can take you, or you can place it on Jesus. And there are times, I've lived it, I've experienced it, where, for whatever reason, I chose to listen to me. That's the wrong choice. But it's not about that. There will be times where you're going to screw up, where you're going to choose the wrong things. At the end of the day, where do you place your faith? Who do you want your foundation to be? On yourself, or do you want to place it on Jesus? You want Him when you lay your head down at night. Is He the central figure in your life? Not always an easy thing. It is not an easy thing, but it is the right thing. And it offers you something that will last far beyond those simple choices that you make based on yourself. Tough. It's tough at times. But it's the right thing. And then that will lead to successful opportunities. So that's a great question. Teed it up pretty high. Yeah, far away.
How much harder for you was it, like the transition from high school to college, like, and then you got on
Okay. Let me tell you about my testimony a little bit. So, I grew up in a home that believed in Jesus, but we did not go to church on Sunday. I did not know the Bible, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to speak as candidly as possible. So, it was a little bit intimidating to go to a church setting because I didn't know it. Like nursery rhymes and Jonah and all these stories for kids that grew up in church, I didn't know them. I didn't know them. But my sophomore year in high school, I made a commitment that it was no longer about me. And that I recognized that God is real. And Jesus is real, and I want to learn more. Okay, so that's kind of where it started for me. So I was kind of at ground zero. A lot of people had a head start that I didn't get. I didn't really start growing until my college years. So I understood that Jesus was real. but I'm still trying to develop. And my brother was already at the University of Georgia. He was a senior, and he made it important to me to go to church on Sundays. And what I'm meaning by that is I would want to sleep in because we'd probably go out the night before till 3 a.m. and I didn't really want to go to church. I wasn't a big party guy, but I like to go downtown sometimes. Once again, not a big party guy, but anyway. But he found it important. He'd go every Sunday, so he'd come and say, "Wake up, we'll go." Well, I ended up forming a great relationship with the pastor there, and grew more in college than I ever did before. Always felt like doing the right thing was the right thing to do, but it gave it reason. Why are you doing the right thing? It's no longer. It's a way of honoring God because He's blessed me so abundantly, and being a disciple and humbling myself, and not always, but trying to constantly find ways of just saying thanks. Thank you for being real and want a relationship with me. And if this in some way honors you, that you, Creator of all things. For me, just a simple, one guy on a blip on this earth at this time. That's some way of honoring you by doing these things. Then yeah, I wouldn't mind the opportunity to do that. But the transition from high school to college was a challenging one, but one of great growth. And also, you're no longer living with your folks. It gives you an opportunity to say, who are you? Well, I mean, in life, there's going to be moments where, a lot of decisions in high school were made by my parents. It's a good thing. Kind of showed me a good path to be on. But I had to make those choices for myself. What do I want to do? Who do I want to be? We had a chapel service. And it was a pretty simple message, but it stuck with me. And it was, your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits, and your habits pretty much define who you are. What do you do? What do you do every day? What do you think about? What are you talking about? What are your actions on a daily basis? What are your habits? When you zoom it out like that, and you're able to zoom it back in, it kind of gives you a fairly clear picture of where your priorities are. Right? I thought that was pretty cool. Thoughts, your words, your actions, your habits. Your habits pretty much define who you are. What do you do? Where do you invest yourself in your time?
You find your friends were really a big role player in how you acted both in high school and college?
Yes and no. Yes, in that the people you spend your time with, they strongly influence what you do and how you spend your time. But no, in the sense that I've got friends that choose to make choices that I would not. And there are situations where they'll do things that I don't choose to do. But they're still my friends, and I still love them. So they don't have to be just like me and everything's in step for me to be friends with them, right? But then again, I don't really like surrounding myself with people that I know constantly screw things up, because sooner or later you get caught in situations that you don't want to find yourself, right? So it's a balance, I think. And there are times where in my life as friends go along that you're closer and further away. I mean, I'm thinking of one friend in particular. I mean, since 6th grade, we played football together, we were in school together, good, close friend. In junior year of high school, he starts smoking weed and hanging out with some folks that I don't really care for. So we grew apart some. I'm not hanging out with him on weekends. We're still friends. I'm like, hey man, what are you doing? Well, I try to influence him as much as possible, but I'm not going to let him lead me down that path. Now, once he, I'm still with him and friends with him and all those things. And at that point, we were wider, still friends. I'm still friends with him to this day. There are times where friendships kind of grow apart a little bit and come back together. That was a phase, I guess. And we got to do that stuff anymore. But we were friends throughout the whole thing. I didn't just cut him off because we went wayward. You know, but it's tough. I think it's more about you being you all the time. You know what I mean? If you're friends with these different people, is it great to associate people that kind of align in bigger picture thoughts? It's probably easier. I know it has been, because you know you feel like you're not constantly in conflict. So there's definitely a comfort there.
Did you find that while you were in high school, potentially being one of the few that were in your shoes, already knowing, believing, that you were able to say some of these young men now, able to help impact other friends and people that you surround yourself with on teams that maybe weren't seeing the right direction?
Yes, and sometimes that's tough because a lot of folks don't find themselves in a position where they want to hear you. So it's easier to see you. And it's not always, I've found that for me, it's not always about, you know, constantly saying, hey man, you know, you're missing the boat here. Because I've got family members like that. My cousin is a non-believer. And he doesn't believe in Jesus. He just kind of does his own thing and tries to live by, I don't know, I guess a moral code that he picks and chooses. I love him to death. He's my cousin. I mean, over at family parties, that kind of thing. But, you know, I'm constantly, in small ways, trying to let him know what he's missing out on. And that's not always saying, you're screwing up. But it's also a good way for me to let my light so shine that I glorify God in what I do. And so it's, you know, I don't have to be in his face with my faith, but I can show him the inner peace that comes with being a believer and knowing that I don't have to rely on myself, that I can unload my burden on Jesus and he willingly accepts it. Thank you for that grace. But yeah, that's not, I mean, it's tough. There are tough little points in life, huh? And as Christians, we're not called to go with the norm. There have been times for me that, you know, you kind of feel isolated and alone and like, what's that guy doing? And they're talking about me. You know, that's not always a comfortable spot to be in, right? I mean, it's easier to be one of the flock, but that's not what we're called to do. So, I mean, if they're not heading the same place we are, then don't go with them. Not easy. Not easy always. What else you got? Anything?
I got a question for you. It relates to Armando. Armando came from the book of Nehemiah. Kind of a long story. But just to summarize real quick, I don't know if you guys remember now, but Nehemiah was around the Old Testament. Persians came through, wiped out Jerusalem, tore down the walls, grabbed everybody who was important, and took them back to Persia. Well, the guy calls Nehemiah to go back and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Because back in those days, if you didn't have walls around your city, you were toast. It was a problem. So everybody who came through was just picking everything out of Jerusalem. The place was just a trash dump. And the guy called to go back and rebuild the walls. They didn't have any people that were really capable of doing that. They didn't have the resources or anything else. So he talks to the king of the people that did this to Jerusalem and asked for resources to go back and build walls. The guy came to the guy hard. He says, okay, gives him the stuff. I mean, that in and of itself is kind of a miracle. He goes back and he's got the resources and the wood, all that to build the walls back. But now he's got to figure out how to get these people who were just crushed and defeated, had been for a few generations, and convince them that they need to build the wall back. That's a pretty incredible leader. He does it. He gives them the vision, and they get it built. And they had all kinds of problems and obstacles to overcome, and they relied on God. God helped them, gave them the direction, and they got it done. And it really changed the lives of those people in a pretty dramatic way. They went from being crushed and defeated to being protected, and they became followers of God again. They kind of given up. God's given up on us. We lost hope. Now they had hope, and they had a relationship with God again. That goes up and down in the Bible, but that was an up period for the Israelites. So how does that relate to us? You touched on it. Being a Christian is tough. Build the wall. When we talk about building the wall, the more kids, the more players we have in the lacrosse community that are followers and willing to live it out and not so much loudly, but courageously and confidently and boldly live their faith. Just imagine that building a wall. Each guy is a part of that wall. The more guys you have around you, the bigger that wall is. The easier it is to live that life if you surround yourself with other believers. And you draw strength from each other. That's why God tells us you got to worship, study, surround yourself with guys that are like mind. They're also followers. You can't be around just followers, otherwise you can't really do what He's calling you to do. He wants you to share that message with other people. Can you talk about that? I mean, the sports world, you got both extremes, obviously. How did you draw strength from those guys in your team who are believers?
Well, when I first got to the New Orleans Saints, I tell people it's like playing on two different teams, because when I got there, it was like the prison league. I'm telling you, they were just bad guys, bad people. So we had a tight end, Ernie Conwell, strong Christian, lived it out every day, was confident and comfortable being a Christian. He was a follower of Christ, and he is who he is, and he's not going to change. So when you go to small groups, we had Bible study and small group. Katrina comes along, and we end up, our chaplain gets displaced. He's in Jackson, Mississippi. Ernie starts flying in 2 guys from Nashville, Tim and Chino, to lead our Bible study, do our chapel service before games. And you start drawing closer with this small group of guys that are consistently going there. And you build that inner network in that small group within your big team, the guys that you know you can count on. And when it comes to that, you need to associate with people that can strengthen your faith, and you strengthen their faith. And there's accountability with that. But it's also, we have to live in this world. We can't build a little village and put a fence around it and say, only people, we live here. But we live in this world with other non-believers. And here is an unbelievable challenge and honor and responsibility for all of us. We are Christ's ambassadors. It's cool. Hey, that's pretty cool. I'm an ambassador for Christ. But also with that comes amazing responsibility. So for people in this world to be able to see what it's like to be a follower of Christ, we're the ones to show it. You know what I mean? That's a heck of a responsibility for us. So you have to associate with those that are willing to challenge us, hold us accountable, push us in all aspects of life, but definitely in our faith. And that comes from drawing near to those that are able and willing and wanting to do that. And are you that person for your neighbor? And then to go out in your teams and in your schools and communities and group of friends and still be that same person. Show them what it means to be a disciple. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, guys.
Hey, before he leaves, I got a question for you.